In the filtered light beneath a eucalyptus canopy, where leaves hang like narrow blades and the air carries the resinous scent of oil and warm bark, a small dome of red moves across the surface of a leaf. It is almost impossibly bright against the dusty greens and silvers of the Australian bush. The insect's curved elytra gleam as if polished, patterned with black spots, arranged in a geometry that seems deliberate and inviting. A child's instinct is to reach toward it. Adults do the same, compelled by a cultural shorthand that equates small size and vivid color with innocence. The ladybird, a member of the family Coccinellidae, has become an emblem of harmlessness in storybooks and garden lore. Yet in this ecosystem, where evolutionary pressure has sculpted even the gentlest shapes into defensive instruments, the ladybird carries chemistry as its shield. To understand why people touch it, one must first consider the visual economy of the landscape. Australian vegetation often presents muted tones, olive, grey, brown, designed to conserve water and reflect harsh sunlight. Against this backdrop, the saturated red or orange of a ladybird is not camouflage but declaration. This phenomenon, known as aposematism, is a signal advertising unprofitability to predators. Birds, reptiles, and small mammals learn quickly that bright coloration can correlate with distastefulness or toxicity. The ladybird's dome shape enhances this signal, creating a high contrast, easily recognizable silhouette. To human eyes, however, aposematic colors have been culturally reframed as charming rather than cautionary. The same visual code that warns a magpie away invites a human hand closer. When disturbed, the ladybird does not rely on speed alone. Its first tactic is stillness. It tucks its legs beneath its body and drops, feigning death in a behavior known as thanatosis. On the forest floor, among leaf litter and bark fragments, a motionless red bead can disappear into visual noise. But if handling persists, a second line of defense activates, one that reveals the insect's chemical arsenal. From the joints of its legs, particularly at the tibiofemoral articulations, droplets of yellow-orange fluid begin to exude. This process, called reflex bleeding, is not injury but deliberate secretion. The fluid is hemolymph infused with alkaloid compounds such as coccinelline, bitter and toxic to many would-be predators. The smell is sharp, slightly acrid, a warning encoded not only in taste but in odor. Predators that attempt to bite a ladybird often recoil. Birds have been observed wiping their beaks against branches after sampling one, a behavior that reinforces avoidance learning. The alkaloids can irritate mucous membranes and disrupt digestion, making the cost of experimentation higher than the caloric reward. In evolutionary terms, the ladybird invests in chemical defense rather than armor thickness or escape velocity. Its bright coloration and chemical exudate function together as a multimodal deterrent, visual and gustatory signals aligned to reduce predation risk. This synergy between appearance and chemistry exemplifies how natural selection integrates sensory channels to create robust survival strategies. For humans, the risk is rarely systemic toxicity, but local irritation. The mistake arises not from toxicity magnitude, but from expectation. A person picks up the ladybird, feels the tickle of its feet, perhaps notices the faint yellow stain on skin, but dismisses it. Moments later, a habitual gesture, rubbing an eye, adjusting glasses, touching the mouth, transfers the alkaloid-laden fluid to sensitive tissue. The result can be immediate discomfort, burning in the eye, mild swelling, or a bitter taste that lingers. In children, whose mucous membranes are more reactive and whose exploratory behaviors are less restrained, the reaction can escalate into tears and panic. The insect has not become more dangerous. Rather, the human has underestimated the consequences of contact. In the broader ecological context, ladybirds are not merely chemical novelties. They are voracious predators of aphids and other soft-bodied insects. On a eucalyptus sapling, clusters of aphids tap into phloem, siphoning sugars and excreting honeydew that coats leaves with sticky residue. This honeydew fosters sooty mold growth, reducing photosynthesis and altering plant health. Ladybirds patrol these infestations with methodical efficiency, consuming dozens of aphids in a single day. Their larvae, elongated and spiny, are even more insatiable than the adults, devouring prey with a predatory intensity that contrasts sharply with the adult's polished appearance. In this way, the cute adult form masks a life cycle stage that resembles a miniature reptile more than a nursery icon. Thermoregulation plays a subtle but critical role in their daily activity. As ectotherms, ladybirds depend on ambient temperature to regulate metabolism and mobility. On cool mornings, they may orient their bodies towards sunlight, maximizing surface area exposure to warm their flight muscles. The dark spots on their elytra can absorb heat more efficiently than lighter areas, a potential microscale adaptation that aids in early day activation. In colder seasons, many species aggregate in sheltered crevices, entering a state of diapause to conserve energy. In Australia's variable climates, these aggregations can occur beneath bark or within rock fissures, forming clusters that collectively reduce heat loss and desiccation risk. The reflex bleeding mechanism itself carries physiological costs. Hemolymph is not expendable without consequence. Excessive loss can impair the insect's internal pressure regulation and immune function. Therefore, the secretion is controlled and limited, deployed only when threat assessment crosses a threshold. This decision-making process, though not conscious in the human sense, reflects neural circuits tuned by evolutionary experience. The ladybird balances the immediate benefit of deterrence against the longer-term cost of fluid loss. Observing this response in slow detail reveals a delicate negotiation between risk and resource. Escalation in human encounters often stems from psychological dissonance. When an organism that appears benign triggers discomfort, the reaction can be disproportionate. A child who feels a sudden sting in the eye may interpret it as severe harm, amplifying distress through fear. In this sense, the ladybird's defense exposes a cognitive bias, the assumption that appearance predicts effect. In Australia, where even seemingly delicate insects can possess chemical or mechanical defenses, this bias becomes a liability. The bush is not curated for human expectations. It is calibrated for survival. Predator-prey interactions involving ladybirds extend beyond simple avoidance. Some specialized parasitoid wasps lay eggs inside ladybird larvae, manipulating their behavior in ways that blur the line between host and guardian. In certain cases, parasitized ladybirds continue to defend the wasp's cocoon after the larva emerges, a phenomenon that illustrates the intricate web of exploitation and adaptation within invertebrate communities. The ladybird, armed with alkaloids and warning colors, is still vulnerable to organisms that have evolved to circumvent those defenses. Ecology here is not a hierarchy, but a network of countermeasures. The broader point emerges gradually through observation. In a landscape shaped by drought, fire and nutrient-poor soils, chemical defense is a recurring theme. Plants produce toxins to deter herbivores. Insects sequester or synthesize compounds to repel predators. Vertebrates learn to decode these signals through experience. The ladybird embodies this chemical conversation in miniature. Its bright shell is a billboard advertising a truth that predators respect and humans often overlook. As the sun lowers and shadows lengthen across the eucalyptus grove, the ladybird resumes its patrol among aphid clusters, leaving faint footprints in the honeydew film. A magpie tilts its head, assessing, then looks away, recognition encoded in memory. The insect's survival does not depend on ferocity, but on clarity of message. For those moving through this environment, the lesson is not fear, but recalibration. Small does not mean defenseless. Bright does not mean benign. In Australia's ecosystems, even the most charming forms carry built-in consequences, each one a testament to the intricate negotiations that define life at every scale. By late afternoon, the wetland air above an Australian billabong becomes layered with movement. Mosquitoes rise in drifting veils, midges assemble in trembling columns, and small flies trace erratic paths over the mirrored surface of the water. To an untrained eye, the air appears chaotic, a scatter of insects pulsing in different directions. Yet just above this swarm, holding position with almost arrogant steadiness, a dragonfly patrols as though suspended on invisible rails. Its wings beat in counterphase pairs, forewings and hindwings offset so that vortices generated by one set are harvested by the other. The body remains level while the head pivots independently, the enormous compound eyes tracking motion with a composure that suggests calculation rather than instinct. In a sky filled with noise, the dragonfly reads order. Dragonflies of the infraorder Anisoptera are often overlooked because of their size relative to birds or bats, yet in the domain of insects, they are apex predators. Their morphology reveals this lineage. The thorax is built as a compact engine, housing flight muscles that drive four wings capable of independent articulation. This configuration allows hovering backward flight, sudden vertical climbs, and tight turns executed at accelerations that would tear apart less specialized flyers. Studies have shown that dragonflies can intercept prey with remarkable success rates, sometimes exceeding 90%, by predicting the future position of a target rather than chasing its current location. The behavior resembles proportional navigation, a strategy seen in guided missiles and raptors alike. The dragonfly does not pursue, it intercepts. The head is dominated by compound eyes that occupy most of its surface area. Each eye consists of thousands of ommatidia, individual visual units that collectively provide near 360-degree vision. In some species, regions of the eye are specialized for higher acuity, allowing detection of small moving objects against bright sky. Ultraviolet sensitivity enhances contrast, making insect wings and bodies stand out in wavelengths invisible to humans. When a midge shifts trajectory, the dragonfly's neural circuitry processes that change in milliseconds, recalculating an interception path that minimizes energy expenditure. This efficiency is not incidental. It reflects evolutionary refinement in an environment where fuel must be conserved for repeated hunts. The air above the wetland becomes a battlefield, not through visible clashes, but through altered behavior. Swarms compress when a dragonfly enters, individuals adjusting altitude or clustering tighter in response to predation pressure. Mosquitoes that once drifted freely adopt more erratic flight patterns, a response shaped by generations of selection. In this way, the dragonfly's presence reshapes the behavior of entire insect communities. It reduces mosquito density, indirectly influencing disease transmission risk for vertebrates that share the habitat. The predator's influence extends beyond individual kills. It modulates the structure of the aerial ecosystem. Thermoregulation governs the tempo of this aerial dominance. Dragonflies are ectothermic, relying on environmental heat to power sustained flight. In the cool of morning, they perch with wings angled toward the sun, absorbing warmth to elevate thoracic temperature. Dark pigmentation on the abdomen can aid in heat absorption, while some species adjust body orientation to regulate exposure. As temperatures rise, they transition from basking to active patrol. In tropical northern Australia, midday heat can push them to shaded perches to avoid overheating, demonstrating a balance between predatory ambition and physiological constraint. Flight, for all its elegance, is metabolically expensive. The cinematic moment unfolds in fractions of a second. A small fly detaches from a reed and darts toward open water. The dragonfly shifts, wings tilting to alter thrust vectors. There is no visible chase, only a slight adjustment of trajectory. Mid-air, the dragonfly's legs extend forward, forming a basket lined with spines. This catch basket is a structural adaptation that allows prey to be scooped from the air without disrupting flight stability. The impact is almost imperceptible, a soft collision that redirects the fly's path into the waiting legs. Wing beats continue uninterrupted as mandibles engage, macerating prey even before the dragonfly lands. Consumption begins in flight, efficiency prioritized over spectacle. Beneath the water's surface, an earlier chapter of this predator's life unfolded in equal intensity. Dragonfly nymphs, aquatic and armored, are ambush hunters among submerged vegetation. They possess a specialized extendable lower lip, the labium, which shoots forward with hydraulic force to seize prey. Small fish, tadpoles, and mosquito larvae fall victim to this underwater strike. The nymph breathes through gills located in the rectal chamber, expelling water in jets that can propel it forward in bursts. This dual existence, aquatic youth and aerial adulthood, links two ecological realms. By consuming mosquito larvae as nymphs and adult mosquitoes as flyers, dragonflies exert predatory pressure at multiple life stages of their prey. Migration adds another dimension to their dominance. Certain Australian species undertake seasonal movements following rainfall patterns, tracking ephemeral wetlands that bloom after monsoons. These migrations can span hundreds of kilometers, guided by wind currents and innate orientation mechanisms that scientists are still unraveling. The ability to colonize new water bodies rapidly ensures that dragonflies exploit transient resources before they vanish. Their life cycle synchronizes with environmental pulses, aligning reproduction with periods of abundant prey and suitable aquatic habitat. The mistake in underestimating dragonflies lies in equating size with influence. Invertebrate predators do not roar or cast shadows large enough to command immediate attention, yet their cumulative impact can surpass that of larger fauna. A single dragonfly may consume dozens of mosquitoes in a day, each meal reducing the reproductive potential of a species that humans often regard as a primary nuisance. Multiply this by populations across wetlands, and the effect becomes substantial. The airspace above water is not a neutral corridor, but contested territory regulated by these agile hunters. Predator-prey dynamics involving dragonflies extend upward as well. Birds such as bee-eaters and swallows prey upon them, exploiting their predictable patrol routes. Spiders stretch orb webs across narrow flight paths, occasionally ensnaring even these adept flyers. Yet dragonflies mitigate risk through flight agility and acute vision, often detecting obstacles in time to veer away. The evolutionary arms race continues, each adaptation prompting countermeasures in another lineage. Ecology here is iterative, each innovation nested within a web of responses. Wing vibration, when observed closely, reveals the mechanical sophistication of flight. The wings are not rigid paddles, but flexible membranes reinforced by veins that distribute stress and allow subtle deformation. During each stroke, vortices form along the leading edges, enhancing lift beyond what steady-state aerodynamics would predict. Researchers studying these dynamics have drawn inspiration for micro-aerial vehicle design, recognizing in dragonflies a blueprint for stability and maneuverability at small scales. What appears effortless is underpinned by complex fluid interactions shaped by millions of years of natural selection. The dominance of dragonflies is also temporal. They thrive in daylight, when vision-based hunting is most effective. As dusk deepens and light levels drop, their patrols wane, yielding the airspace to nocturnal predators such as bats. The battlefield shifts, governed by sensory modalities suited to different hours. In this turnover lies a broader lesson about ecological partitioning. Dominance is often bounded by time as much as by territory. Standing at the edge of the wetland as evening approaches, one can sense the transition. Dragonflies, once suspended like living jewels in shafts of sun, retreat to reeds to roost. Mosquitoes begin to rise in thicker clouds, reclaiming the air their predator policed all afternoon. The equilibrium is dynamic, oscillating between control and release. The dragonfly's presence has shaped the day's insect movements, reducing densities and altering trajectories. Its absence will allow other actors to step forward. In appreciating the dragonfly, the narrative shifts from spectacle to precision. This is not a predator that relies on brute force, but on geometry and timing. Its success rate stems from anticipation, its dominance from efficiency. In the vast hierarchy of life, power often resides in forms too small to inspire awe at first glance. Yet when the camera lingers on a dragonfly poised mid-air, eyes faceted and intent, wings humming with calibrated force, it becomes clear that control of the sky does not require size. It requires mastery of motion, and in this realm, the dragonfly reigns with quiet authority. By midsummer, the Australian bush does not merely warm, it vibrates. Heat presses downward from a bleached sky, settling into bark fissures and leaf litter until the entire woodland seems to hum with stored sunlight. Then, almost without transition, the sound begins. It rises not from a single source, but from every direction at once. A layered surge of oscillating pulses that merge into a continuous metallic roar. The cicadas have emerged, and with them, the atmosphere changes. Nothing touches you, nothing strikes or bites, yet perception itself begins to warp under the pressure of sound. Cicadas of the family Cicadidae are not predators of flesh nor carriers of venom. Their mouthparts are designed for piercing plant tissue and drawing xylem sap, a diet so dilute in nutrients that vast volumes must be processed to sustain them. Yet their influence on the ecosystem during peak emergence is profound. In Australia, where seasonal rainfall and soil temperature dictate life cycles, certain species synchronize their final molt with extraordinary precision. After years spent underground as nymphs, feeding quietly on root fluids, they tunnel upward in coordinated waves. The soil surface fractures with emergence holes, and tree trunks become vertical highways for pale, soft-bodied climbers seeking elevation before shedding their final exoskeleton. The transformation from subterranean nymph to winged adult is both vulnerable and spectacular. Anchored to bark, the nymph's cuticle splits along the thorax, and the adult cicada pulls itself free, soft wings unfolding like translucent sails. Within hours, hemolymph pumps into wing veins, hardening membranes into functional flight structures. What follows is not stealth, but proclamation. Male cicadas possess specialized sound-producing organs called tymbals, ribbed membranes on the sides of the abdomen that buckle inward when muscles contract. Each contraction snaps the membrane, producing a click. Rapid repetition of these clicks, amplified by air-filled abdominal cavities acting as resonating chambers, generates the characteristic high-decibel chorus that defines Australian summer. This sound is not incidental background noise, it is an ecological force. In some species, sound levels can exceed 100 decibels at close range, comparable to heavy machinery. The intensity masks subtler auditory cues in the environment. For animals that rely on hearing to detect predators, small mammals, reptiles, even humans, the acoustic landscape becomes saturated. A rustle in leaf litter that might signal a snake's movement dissolves into the larger wave of cicada calls. The forest, once layered with discrete sounds, bird alarm notes, insect wing beats, wind in foliage, collapses into a near-continuous wall of vibration. Predators adapt to this acoustic overload in different ways. Some birds exploit the distraction, hunting cicadas directly, capitalizing on their abundance and limited evasive flight. Others, such as raptors and snakes, may benefit indirectly from reduced detection by prey whose auditory vigilance is compromised. The cicada's strategy, often termed predator satiation, hinges on overwhelming numbers. By emerging en masse, they ensure that even if many are consumed, enough survive to reproduce. The cost of being conspicuous is offset by sheer volume. In evolutionary terms, abundance becomes armor. For humans moving through such a scream zone, reliance on hearing as a primary warning system becomes a liability. The mistake lies in assuming that auditory perception remains reliable under all conditions. In quieter seasons, footsteps of a large lizard or the wing beat of a startled bird might serve as early signals of disturbance. During a cicada emergence, these cues are submerged beneath relentless resonance. Visual attention must compensate, scanning more deliberately for movement. Yet heat, another companion of cicada season, can dull focus and slow reaction time. The combination of thermal stress and acoustic saturation alters awareness in subtle but consequential ways. Cicadas themselves are exquisitely tuned to temperature. Their calling rate increases with warmth, and many species require body temperatures above a threshold to sustain prolonged sound production. Some bask deliberately to reach optimal thoracic temperatures before initiating calls. In this way, thermoregulation intersects with reproduction. The louder and more persistent the call, the greater the likelihood of attracting a mate. Females, less conspicuous and silent, evaluate males based on acoustic qualities, selecting partners whose calls signal vigor and species identity. The forest becomes a sonic marketplace where evolutionary fitness is broadcast at full volume. The ecological ripple extends downward as well. When cicadas feed, they tap into plant vascular systems, withdrawing water-rich sap and excreting excess fluid as honeydew. This sugary excretion drips onto leaves below, fostering growth of sooty molds and attracting ants that harvest the resource. Ant attendants can, in turn, influence other insect populations, creating localized shifts in community dynamics. When adults die after their brief reproductive phase, their bodies fall to the forest floor in numbers sufficient to enrich soil with pulses of nitrogen and phosphorus. Nutrients locked underground for years during nymphal development return to surface ecosystems in a sudden influx, feeding decomposers and, indirectly, plant growth. The mass emergence is not random, but synchronized with environmental cues. Soil temperature at specific depths acts as a clock, signaling that conditions above ground are suitable for adult survival. In some species outside Australia, emergences follow multi-year cycles of striking regularity, a phenomenon that has fascinated evolutionary biologists for decades. In Australian taxa, cycles may be shorter or more flexible, yet the principle of synchronization remains. The collective timing reduces per capita predation risk and maximizes mating success. Coordination at such scale underscores the power of environmental rhythms in shaping life histories. In the midst of this acoustic storm, other species recalibrate. Bats adjust echolocation frequencies to navigate through dense insect traffic at dusk, exploiting the abundance once the sun sets and cicada calls diminish. Spiders repair webs more frequently as winged adults collide in clumsy bursts of flight. Even humans find behavior altered, conversations shorten, concentration wavers, and the persistent drone induces a subtle fatigue. The environment has not attacked, yet it has altered cognitive terrain. The real lesson emerges gradually through sustained observation. Danger in ecosystems does not always manifest as a direct physical threat. It can arise from environmental modification, changes in soundscape, visibility, or chemical composition that shift the balance of perception. In a cicada-dominated woodland, the auditory channel becomes unreliable. The brain, accustomed to passing layered signals, confronts saturation. Visual scanning must intensify, and assumptions about quiet as safety must be discarded. The forest has not become more hostile, it has become louder, and in that volume lies the potential for oversight. As the sun lowers and shadows lengthen, the cicada chorus may intensify briefly before tapering with falling temperatures. The sudden relative silence that follows can feel almost disorienting, as though a curtain has been lifted. Insects that relied on the acoustic cover of the afternoon adjust once more, and predators that pause during peak heat resume patrol. The ecosystem oscillates between phases of overload and reprieve, each with its own set of constraints and opportunities. Standing beneath a eucalyptus canopy in full cicada chorus, one senses the paradox of their influence. They do not bite or sting. They do not pursue. Yet they reshape the sensory architecture of the habitat. Through synchronized emergence and acoustic force, they convert space into vibration, challenging the reliance on hearing as a primary guide. The environment in this state blinds not by darkness, but by excess. Awareness becomes an active process rather than a passive reception of cues. In that realization lies the chapter's core truth. Survival depends not only on recognizing predators, but on recognizing when the landscape itself has altered the terms of perception. Dusk settles differently in Australia's wetlands than it does in open country. The light does not simply fade, it thickens. Warm air rises from mudbanks and paperbark swamps, carrying the scent of tannin-stained water and decaying reeds. Frogs begin their layered choruses, each species staking acoustic territory in overlapping pulses, while dragonflies that ruled the afternoon air withdraw to stems and shadows. In the stillness that follows, something smaller takes possession of the sky. It arrives without spectacle, without the drama of talons or venom. A faint whine near the ear, a brush against skin, and then nothing more than a pinpoint of sensation. The mosquito's power lies precisely in this modesty. It does not win in the moment of contact. It wins in the hours and days that follow. Mosquitoes of the family Culicidae are often dismissed because their attack feels trivial. The bite rarely causes immediate pain. Instead, the female mosquito, only females feed on blood, approaches guided by a sophisticated suite of sensory adaptations. She detects carbon dioxide plumes exhaled by vertebrates, traces gradients of body heat, and responds to lactic acid and other compounds in sweat. Specialized receptors on her antennae and maxillary palps allow her to discriminate between hosts at a distance that seems improbable given her size. In a landscape where mammals rest near water at dusk, exhaling steadily and radiating warmth, the mosquito does not search randomly. She triangulates. The invisibility of this approach is not absence, but precision. The danger is subtle because it unfolds beyond immediate awareness. As she lands, the mosquito inserts a bundle of needle-like mouthparts through the skin. The process is mechanical and chemical at once. Her saliva contains anticoagulants and immunomodulatory compounds that prevent blood clotting and dampen the host's immediate response. The body does not register sharp pain because the mosquito's proboscis is engineered to minimize detection, slipping between cells rather than tearing through them. What lingers afterward, the itch and swelling, is not the bite itself, but the immune system's reaction to foreign proteins. Histamine floods the area, increasing blood flow and causing inflammation. The discomfort arrives after the attacker has already departed. The mistake in this environment is assuming that minor irritation equates to minor consequence. Dusk exposure near stagnant water, billabongs, mangrove pools, slow creeks, places a human within the mosquito's optimal hunting window. Many Australian species, including those in the genera Aedes and Anopheles, are crepuscular or nocturnal, exploiting lower light levels when avian predators are less active and humidity is higher. Sweaty stillness amplifies attraction. After a day of walking or working outdoors, perspiration accumulates on skin, releasing volatile compounds that act as chemical beacons. Remaining motionless at twilight, perhaps to admire a sunset or rest after exertion, creates a stationary heat source exhaling carbon dioxide into humid air. To the mosquito, this is not leisure, it is opportunity. In wetlands and floodplains, the life cycle of the mosquito is intimately tied to water that does not flow. Females lay eggs on the surface of stagnant pools or in damp soil that will later flood. Larvae hatch and hang suspended just beneath the surface, breathing through siphons that pierce the air-water boundary. They feed on microorganisms and organic debris, converting microscopic productivity into biomass that will soon take flight. The transformation from larva to pupa to adult can occur within days in warm conditions, a rapid turnover that allows populations to surge after rainfall. These ephemeral water bodies, often overlooked as minor features of the landscape, function as nurseries that pulse with life following seasonal monsoons or summer storms. Escalation rarely appears dramatic at first. One bite itches. Several create a constellation of irritation across exposed skin. Multiple bites increase not only discomfort, but statistical risk. In regions where mosquitoes act as vectors for pathogens, viruses such as Ross River virus or Murray Valley encephalitis, the probability of transmission correlates with exposure frequency. Even in areas where disease prevalence is low, repeated bites disrupt sleep. The human response to nocturnal irritation is a cycle of scratching, repositioning, and waking. Sleep fragmentation impairs cognitive performance, reaction time, and emotional regulation the following day. In survival terms, this is a cost that compounds quietly. The concept of survival economics becomes tangible here. Energy, attention, and decision-making capacity are finite resources. A single night of poor sleep due to persistent mosquito activity diminishes situational awareness. In complex environments, whether navigating dense bushland, operating machinery, or driving long rural roads, reduced alertness can translate into misjudgments. The mosquito does not need to incapacitate its host to influence outcomes. By extracting small increments of blood and imposing minor inflammatory burdens, it shifts the balance of energy and focus. The cost is paid later in slowed reflexes and frayed patience. Predator-prey dynamics around mosquitoes are intricate. Bats emerge at dusk, sweeping low over water to intercept swarms, their echolocation finely tuned to detect tiny bodies in motion. Swallows and martins feed opportunistically in the same window of time, while fish consume larvae at the surface. Dragonfly nymphs, aquatic predators themselves, reduce larval populations beneath the waterline. Yet these controls are often insufficient to eliminate mosquitoes entirely, particularly in disturbed habitats where natural predators are reduced. Urban edges and agricultural runoff can create stagnant pools devoid of fish, granting mosquitoes a reproductive advantage. Human alteration of landscapes frequently amplifies the very species that inconvenience us. Mosquito physiology is equally shaped by thermal constraints. As ectotherms, their flight muscles require warm conditions to function optimally. Evening humidity prevents desiccation, allowing longer foraging bouts. Some species enter diapause during colder months, their eggs remaining dormant until favorable conditions return. Others migrate short distances with wind currents, dispersing across floodplains. The resilience of mosquitoes lies not in brute force, but in flexibility. They exploit transient resources and adapt quickly to environmental fluctuations. There is an irony embedded in their biology. Only females feed on blood, and even then, only to acquire proteins necessary for egg development. Nectar remains their primary energy source, and males feed exclusively on plant sugars. In this sense, the mosquito is both pollinator and parasite, occupying dual ecological roles. Certain plant species benefit from incidental pollination when mosquitoes visit flowers at dusk. The same insect that irritates a mammal's skin may contribute to the reproduction of wetland flora. Ecosystems rarely align with human categories of friend or foe. They operate on networks of exchange. The escalation from mild exposure to panic often stems from surprise. When bites accumulate unnoticed until itching intensifies, the realization of vulnerability can provoke anxiety. Swatting blindly in low light increases agitation but rarely improves outcomes. The hum near the ear is amplified by fatigue, each sound interpreted as an imminent attack. In extreme cases, individuals retreat indoors or into vehicles without addressing underlying attractants such as standing water nearby. The mosquito's victory is not dramatic. It is cumulative. Observing a wetland at twilight with careful attention reveals the choreography underlying this interaction. Carbon dioxide plumes drift invisibly above resting kangaroos at the water's edge. Mosquitoes hover within these gradients, adjusting flight paths in response to subtle shifts in airflow. Their compound eyes detect contrast rather than detail, guiding them toward dark silhouettes against lighter horizons. Upon landing, mechanoreceptors on their legs assess surface texture before the proboscis probes for a suitable capillary. The entire sequence unfolds in seconds, a convergence of sensory input and motor precision refined over millions of years. In Australia's diverse climates, from tropical north to temperate south, mosquito species assemblages vary, yet the principle remains constant. The invisible attacker does not demand immediate respect. Its threat is deferred, expressed in delayed discomfort, potential disease, and compromised alertness. Recognizing this pattern reframes the interaction. Protective measures at dusk, covering skin, reducing exposure near stagnant water, maintaining airflow, are not acts of paranoia, but investments in next-day clarity. The economy of survival favors prevention over reaction. As night deepens and stars emerge above the reeds, the wetland hum persists. Bats carve arcs through the darkness, frogs continue their rhythmic calls, and mosquitoes trace invisible maps between water and host. The ecosystem functions through countless small exchanges of energy and matter. Within this network, the mosquito occupies a niche defined not by spectacle, but by persistence. Its impact accumulates quietly, reminding those who move through these environments that danger does not always announce itself with fangs or venom. Sometimes it whispers, waits, and collects its due in the margins of attention. The Australian forest at shoulder height is a geometry of repetition. Twigs fork at familiar angles, eucalyptus leaves hang in alternating patterns, and thin branches cast parallel shadows that blur into one another as light shifts with the wind. The eye adapts quickly to this structure, building a mental shorthand for background. Once the pattern is learned, the brain begins to filter it out. Movement stands out, stillness dissolves. It is within this quiet agreement between vegetation and perception that the stick insect thrives. At first glance, there is nothing to see. A branch arcs outward from a young eucalyptus sapling, pale and slightly knotted. It sways gently in the afternoon breeze, in rhythm with the rest of the foliage. Only when the wind ceases does something feel subtly wrong. The twig continues its minute oscillation, a fraction of a second longer than the others. The illusion fractures. What seemed to be plant tissue is in fact an animal of the order Phasmatodea, its elongated body segmented and jointed with anatomical precision that mirrors the plant it inhabits. Legs align with petioles, spines mimic leaf buds. Even the subtle irregularities, small bumps, lichen-like textures, are part of the disguise. Stick insects represent one of evolution's most refined experiments in camouflage. Their bodies do not merely resemble sticks, they are integrated into the visual grammar of the forest. This strategy, known as crypsis, reduces detection by predators that rely on sight. Birds scanning branches for caterpillars may pass over a stick insect repeatedly without recognition. The effectiveness of this disguise is enhanced by behavior. When wind moves through the canopy, stick insects sway in synchrony, amplifying the illusion of plant identity. This coordinated movement is not random, but triggered by mechanoreceptors that detect air currents, allowing the insect to align its motion with surrounding vegetation. The danger, however, emerges not from predation, but from misinterpretation. Humans moving through brush often rely on quick visual sorting to distinguish safe from unsafe. A hand reaches to steady balance on what appears to be a branch. A foot steps through undergrowth, assuming flexibility beneath it. When that branch flexes unnaturally or that twig suddenly shifts, the reflexive reaction can cause injury. Startle responses lead to abrupt withdrawal, loss of footing, or contact with sharper vegetation nearby. In some species, the stick insect itself contributes to this hazard through defensive structures. Spines along the legs and thorax, particularly in spiny stick insects of Australia, can be surprisingly rigid and sharp. These are not ornamental, but serve as deterrents against predators attempting to grasp them. Handling wildlife compounds the risk. A stick insect's stillness invites curiosity. Its resemblance to a child's toy or a delicate ornament tempts gentle lifting. Yet beneath that fragile appearance lies a suite of defensive adaptations. When grasped, many species employ thanatosis, dropping abruptly from the branch and falling to the forest floor. The sudden release can startle the handler, causing reflexive flinching. Other species arch their abdomens and release a defensive chemical spray from thoracic glands. In certain Australian phasmids, this spray contains irritant compounds capable of causing temporary eye pain or mild skin irritation. The discharge is precise, aimed toward the perceived threat, and can reach several tens of centimeters. What appears to be passive mimicry is paired with active chemical deterrence. The ecological role of stick insects extends beyond their camouflage theatrics. Primarily herbivorous, they feed on leaves of eucalyptus and other native plants. Their feeding patterns are often nocturnal, reducing exposure to diurnal predators and minimizing water loss in hot climates. The Australian environment, prone to drought and high temperatures, exerts selective pressure on insects to conserve moisture. Stick insects possess cuticles that limit desiccation and exhibit behaviors such as remaining motionless during peak heat. Some species orient their bodies to reduce surface area exposed to direct sunlight, an understated but effective thermoregulatory tactic. Predator-prey interactions involving stick insects illustrate an evolutionary arms race in visual cognition. Birds that specialize in detecting camouflaged prey develop sharper pattern recognition abilities, while stick insects evolve increasingly elaborate morphological details. Some species bear lobed appendages resembling leaf margins, complete with irregular bite marks, mimicking herbivore damage. Others display color variations that match seasonal foliage shifts. This dynamic interplay highlights the coevolution of predator perception and prey deception. The forest becomes a testing ground for visual algorithms, biological minds refining strategies against one another. The mistake of treating a stick insect as harmless stems from conflating non-aggressive with non-defensive. Unlike a dragonfly that hunts or a cassowary that commands space, the stick insect exerts influence through invisibility. Its survival depends on remaining unnoticed. When discovered and mishandled, it reacts not out of malice, but necessity. The spines and sprays are last resort measures, deployed only when camouflage fails. Yet to the human who misjudges the situation, the experience can feel disproportionate to the creature's size. On the forest floor, fallen leaves accumulate around decomposing logs. Stick insects that drop during disturbance may remain motionless among this litter for extended periods, blending seamlessly with the detritus. Their ability to remain still for hours conserves energy and reduces detection risk. Metabolic rates in these insects are adapted to a lifestyle where long intervals of inactivity punctuate brief feeding excursions. This energy economy mirrors the broader resource constraints of Australian ecosystems, where productivity can fluctuate dramatically with rainfall patterns. Reproduction introduces another layer of intrigue. Many stick insect species are capable of parthenogenesis, a form of asexual reproduction in which females produce offspring without male fertilization. This strategy allows rapid population establishment in isolated habitats, but reduces genetic diversity. In stable environments where camouflage strategies are well matched to vegetation, such uniformity may suffice. However, in changing conditions, such as post-fire landscapes common in Australia, genetic variability becomes advantageous. Fire, while destructive, often stimulates regrowth of eucalyptus, creating fresh foliage for herbivores. Stick insect populations may rebound in these regenerating areas, their life cycles intertwined with the disturbance regimes of the forest. The forest's capacity to hide threats in plain sight extends beyond stick insects. It is a function of cognitive filtering. Human brains prioritize movement and high-contrast shapes, relegating repetitive patterns to background. Camouflage exploits this bias. By aligning form and color with environmental templates, stick insects bypass conscious detection. The risk lies not in the insect itself, but in the assumption that what is unseen is inert. Stepping through brush with complacency can result in unexpected contact with thorned plants, unstable branches, or defensive wildlife. As twilight approaches, stick insects emerge from deeper recesses to feed. Under low light, their camouflage remains effective, but their movements become slightly more apparent against dimming foliage. Bats sweep overhead, targeting moths and other flying insects, largely ignoring these motionless silhouettes. The stick insect's strategy remains grounded and patient, a testament to survival through subtraction rather than confrontation. Observing one at close range reveals delicate textures, the fine segmentation of the abdomen, the articulation of legs that fold and extend with measured grace. There is no excess in its design, only refinement toward invisibility. In a forest saturated with sensory stimuli, sound from cicadas, movement from dragonflies, color from flowering understory plants, the stick insect withdraws into visual neutrality. It survives by convincing the world it does not exist. The closing lesson emerges not as warning, but as recalibration. The forest does not advertise all of its complexities. It embeds them within patterns so familiar that perception smooths them away. To move safely through such an environment requires attentiveness not only to conspicuous threats, but to the quiet possibility that what appears inert may be alive. The stick insect embodies this principle with quiet authority. It does not chase or sting unless forced. It simply occupies the space between attention and assumption. In that narrow margin, injury can occur, not because the insect seeks it, but because human expectation failed to recognize the depth of camouflage woven into the living fabric of the forest. The forest floor of southeastern Australia appears still at first glance, a mosaic of dry eucalyptus leaves, bark ribbons, and iron-red soil that holds the warmth of the afternoon long after the sun has shifted west. Resin hangs in the air with a sharp medicinal scent, and cicadas rattle from the canopy in waves that feel almost electrical. Yet the stillness is an illusion. Beneath the bark curls and between the leaf veins, something is moving with intent. A single bull ant, nearly 3 centimeters long, steps into a shaft of light, her body lacquered in black and amber, mandibles parted like twin blades. Her compound eyes, unusually large for an ant, catch and track movement in a way that feels unnervingly deliberate. She does not behave like a blind scavenger following a chemical line. She looks at you. Bull ants of the genus Myrmetia are feared for a reason that becomes immediately clear when one observes them at ground level. They do not nip and retreat as many ants do. They commit. Their anatomy reflects this commitment. Elongated legs for speed, powerful mandibles for gripping, and a smooth, flexible gaster that curves forward to deliver a sting driven by potent venom. Unlike many ant species that rely heavily on pheromone trails and mass recruitment, bull ants are largely solitary foragers. They hunt visually, scanning the terrain with some of the sharpest vision recorded among ants. Research has shown that certain Myrmecia species can navigate using visual landmarks with a precision that rivals small vertebrates, memorizing panoramic scenes of tree trunks and canopy gaps to relocate their nests after long foraging excursions. This visual acuity transforms them from anonymous swarm members into individual pursuers capable of locking onto a target and adjusting their path in real time. A misstep in this ecosystem is rarely dramatic at first. It is often as simple as standing still in the wrong place. Bull ants maintain nest entrances that are sometimes little more than a small opening at the base of a tree or beneath a log, but their foraging lanes radiate outward like invisible spokes. These lanes are not always marked by heavy pheromone highways. Instead, they are defined by repeated movement patterns, the ants memorizing terrain features and using celestial cues for orientation. Step into one of these corridors, pause, and your stillness becomes a landmark that was not there before. To a bull ant, abrupt changes in the visual field signal potential prey or threat. She approaches not with the hesitant zigzag of a cautious insect, but with direct, accelerating purpose. The first contact is rarely accidental. The ant rises on her legs, mandibles open, assessing. If swatted blindly, the response is not retreat, but escalation. Bull ants are known for repeated stinging, pivoting their bodies to drive the sting into skin multiple times while maintaining a grip with their mandibles. The venom contains a complex cocktail of peptides and proteins that trigger intense pain and, in some individuals, severe allergic reactions. Pain here is not incidental. It is a weapon refined by natural selection. A predator that learns to associate that level of pain with this species is unlikely to repeat the experiment. In evolutionary terms, pain is memory encoded in nerve tissue. The mistake many make in this environment is panic-driven movement. A sudden flurry of steps, a reflexive hop backward, or a blind swat increases surface area and instability. Ankles and calves, exposed between sock and hem, become primary targets simply because they are closest to the ground and within the ant's strike zone. Bull ants can pursue over short distances with surprising speed, adjusting their path as you move. Unlike swarm-based species that rely on numbers, A single bull ant can deliver enough deterrent force to alter the behavior of animals many times her size. Panic movement multiplies contacts. Each footfall risks landing closer to another forager or near the nest entrance itself. The forest floor, once merely textured and warm, becomes a field of hidden tripwires. Their relentlessness is rooted in colony structure and ecological niche. Bull ant colonies are relatively small compared to those of many other ants, sometimes numbering only a few hundred individuals. This smaller workforce means each worker represents a significant investment of energy. Foraging success and nest defense are therefore critical. Visual hunting allows them to exploit prey that might be missed by scent-driven species, small arthropods, caterpillars, even other ants. They are both predator and scavenger, occupying a mid-level trophic role that influences the abundance of invertebrates in their territory. By preying on herbivorous insects, they indirectly affect plant health. By scavenging carrion, they participate in nutrient recycling. Their aggression is not gratuitous, but tied to the economics of survival in nutrient-poor Australian soils. Thermoregulation shapes their daily rhythm. On cooler mornings, bull ants may bask near nest entrances, absorbing solar heat to elevate their body temperature for efficient muscle function. As ectotherms, their speed and reaction time are temperature dependent. Midday heat can push them into shaded zones or deeper into the nest to avoid lethal overheating, especially in exposed habitats. Observing their activity patterns reveals a choreography dictated by sunlight angles and soil temperature gradients. To step into their territory during peak activity is to enter a system already optimized for rapid response. Predator-prey interactions around bull ants are complex. Echidnas and certain lizards feed on ants, yet they approach bull ant nests with caution. Birds that probe the leaf litter must weigh the caloric reward against the risk of painful retaliation. Some spiders exploit the ants' predictable routes, anchoring webs near foraging lanes to intercept them. In this way, the bull ant is both hunter and hunted, a node in a web of energy transfer that extends from eucalyptus canopy to subterranean fungi. Even their nests influence soil structure, aerating the ground and altering microbial communities as they excavate tunnels. The colony is not just a defensive unit, but an ecological engineer. Escalation, when it happens, unfolds quickly. A person who kneels to examine a plant, placing a hand unknowingly near a nest entrance, may trigger a defensive surge. Multiple workers emerge, alerted by vibrations and visual disturbance. The forest, moments ago filled with bird calls and wind, narrows to the immediate geometry of ground and limb. Pain sharpens perception, but also fragments coordination. The instinct to brush away the source can drive the hand closer to additional ants. Falling or kneeling increases contact points and lowers vulnerable areas into the ant's operational zone. What began as a single sting becomes a cascade, not because the ants are numerous like an army, but because the human response amplifies exposure. Survival logic in this setting is counterintuitive to the adrenal surge. Calm retreat, not flailing resistance, reduces visual stimulus and contact time. Stepping back deliberately, brushing ants away with controlled movements, and creating distance from the nest entrance interrupts the feedback loop of pursuit. Protecting ankles and calves by maintaining awareness of ground contact zones, wearing appropriate footwear, and avoiding kneeling in dense leaf litter are simple strategies grounded in understanding the ant's behavior. The goal is not dominance, but disengagement. In ecosystems where small organisms wield disproportionate defensive power, humility becomes a survival trait. To observe bull ants over extended periods is to appreciate a form of persistence that borders on austere. Individual workers can live for several years, an unusually long lifespan for ants, investing seasons of experience into their navigation maps. Some species, such as Myrmecia pyriformis, forage at dusk and even at night, guided by the moon and polarized light patterns, demonstrating sensory adaptations that challenge assumptions about insect limitation. Their world is not a blur of chemical signals, but a landscape of remembered silhouettes and shifting luminance. Fear of bull ants often stems from the shock of being confronted by an insect that does not behave passively. Yet within that fear lies an opportunity to understand the precision of their design. Pain is their language of boundaries. Relentless pursuit is not malice, but a calculation embedded in neural circuits that favor decisive defense over tentative retreat. In the Australian forest, where resources are patchy and survival is a daily negotiation with heat, predators and competition, the bull ant stands as a reminder that scale does not determine influence. A creature small enough to be overlooked can, through sensory sophistication and chemical potency, command space far beyond its size. Standing again at the edge of a eucalyptus grove, the ground no longer seems benign. It reads as a layered map of territories, trails and thermal gradients. The bull ant continues her patrol, antennae sampling the air, eyes scanning for movement that does not belong. To move through this environment safely is to move with awareness, to recognize that every step intersects with lives calibrated for defense and pursuit. The lesson is not to fear the forest floor, but to respect its inhabitants, understanding that in this ecosystem, commitment is measured not in volume or roar, but in the unwavering arc of a sting delivered with evolutionary certainty.